Hello and welcome back to the Gaming 5. Now the first thing I want to address is that in my previous PlayStation VR video, I mentioned the use of polarization. That was incorrect, but I do owe you some of the thinking. You see, the headset was so light that I figured they probably used something smarter than an actual physical divider on the inside. Now some people think you don't have to block off each half of the screen, which is both right and wrong. You look at the $20 Google Cardboard and you'll find that there's no divider. It just has the two lenses focusing on each half of the screen. At the same time, if you want optimal quality and better adjustment, you want to make sure the two halves of the screen are not bleeding any light or image into one another. Now some of you might not know what I mean, so brief explanation. Light comes off of the screen in a somewhat conical pattern. That means even though each lens is only focusing on one half, the light from this half comes out and can go into the other lens. In the right or wrong conditions, you'll notice this as ghosting or some other image quality problems. Maybe the motion seems a little off, and that's because you're catching some light from the other side. Ironically, most people won't even notice that, but I did want to put that out there because I am a stickler for quality. Which is why I bought this cheap China-made $40 VR headset. Oh, this is absolutely inferior to the PlayStation VR. But the real question is if PlayStation VR is $360, or for people who don't own the camera, closer to over $400 better than this porn viewer VR headset. Let's first talk a bit about what the PlayStation VR encompasses. The PlayStation VR uses a single 5.7-inch OLED screen with RGB subpixel fill, which pretty much means that it tries to minimize that screen door effect, or the ability to see between the pixels. Granted, in this setup, my phone is not only acting as the screen, but also the output device. Now this phone has a Quad HD or 1440p 5.3-inch IPS display, so it is technically a higher resolution than the PlayStation VR. Now inside this setup is relatively simple. You can actually see there is a physical divider that blocks off the light from each side of the screen, and then of course you've got the porn goggle. The lens is on this side. Now for a cheap headset, there actually is a bit of adjustment. You can see there's a knob here, and there's a knob on the top. Now it just so happens my phone has excellent gyro tracking, and while I'm sure the LED tracking is a little better, it does add cost to the PlayStation VR since, again, most people don't own the camera. So based on my experiences, other than a 5.7-inch OLED display and better adjustment, which consequently means a better field of view, this thing gets about 50 degrees, but China-made, is the PlayStation VR really giving me $400 more? Really, part of the only way you can justify the PlayStation VR is the fact that it's going to have access to broader games. I only get access to porn, Google Cardboard, and more. The PlayStation VR is this thing here with better adjustment and LEDs, and consequently the screen, while better than my phone's screen, is probably balanced out by the fact that my screen is a higher resolution. Would you really pay $400 for a 5.7-inch OLED screen and a better field of view? In terms of value, the closer I look at the PlayStation VR, the more I realize how unappealing it is. It's a premium to enjoy quality VR at this time, which brings into question the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive. Keep in mind these two do use two separate screens on the inside, which means they're maximizing adjustment for everybody, and also maximizing image quality because you no longer have to worry about blocking each half of the screen off in the middle. And yet the reality is those two are also too expensive. While the Oculus Rift is really only $100 more for two separate screens, most people don't have a PC with the required power. I fortunately do, but for many they're looking at least a $1,000 investment compared to the, optimally, PlayStation 4 Pro and PlayStation VR, which is about an $800 investment. So in conclusion, what I'm finding is that the PlayStation VR is not the budget high-end headset, it's the expensive budget headset. I hate to say this because I actually like the PlayStation VR, but the more I look at it, the more it has in common with this than it does the other two more expensive options. For reference, for $400, I can buy a PlayStation 4 Pro, which has an 8-core overclocked CPU and a 4.2 teraflop GPU, along with a Blu-ray drive and a bunch of other stuff that makes it work, and a controller. And if you don't fully understand why I would go with the PlayStation 4 Pro, it's because the PlayStation 4 really doesn't have that much power when it comes to rendering two viewpoints at 60, 90, or 120 frames per second based on what the developer wants to do. I'm racking my brain and I'm actually beginning to boil down to either the PlayStation VR or the PlayStation 4 Pro. If I'm going to spend that money, I might as well spend the extra $100 and get an Oculus Rift, since in my case that would actually be the cheaper option since I have a PC gaming rig that is fully VR capable. The PlayStation VR is clearly a premium, just as severe as the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive. In fact, if I wanted to go VR, it seems like Oculus Rift is becoming my best option. Well, that's it for today. I'll see you next time on the Gaming 5.